Very quick disclaimer, when I first recorded this, I was suffering really bad from allergies, and it was many months ago. I waited to see if information changed around this, and as far as I can tell, nothing has. I waited to talk about the cut content from Spider-Man involving the symbiotes because of the nature of the Insomniac hack and the leaks, which I will address here. But if you're like, wow, why does that guy sound like he's underwater at points? Yeah, I was really suffering health-wise at this point. So I do hope you enjoy the video. I appreciate you. It'll be, a little bit of a longer discussion, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Today's rejected media is one that's a little sad. This is one of my favorite series I do on this channel, where we take a look at cut content, and unfortunately, when it comes down to it, there is always only so much information that we can get. When you reach out to game developers and people like that, which I do actually try to do, a lot of them do not want to talk about stuff like this because, it's projects that were recent. I'm going to be trying to reach out more to people from past games, going forward, things that are years out, see if people are open to that. When it comes to things like today with Marvel Spider-Man 2, just keep in mind that it's a compilation of all kinds of information, things like the Insomniac leak, unfortunately, which I mostly avoided, but I do think it's important to look at now. I mean, we're months out from it. It's like no one's getting hurt by looking at that info now. Things that have been, provided by leakers, things that have been provided by people who data mined the PC version of the game, all these different things. So T, you're here with me today, and I do think that there is kind of a sad element to today's video where we're looking at the cut content around really the symbiotes, Venom, and Tony Todd.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the big thing, is that first and foremost, Tony Todd, with him passing away, I think that's the big thing.
Tragic.
I don't know, it's something that we talked about before with Kevin Conroy, is just the impact that you feel and kind of looking back at what could have been and all the stuff that he did, obviously, that was incredible, but also looking at what else could have been done here, So I think that's one thing that we'll definitely talk about, and then how that ties into Spider-Man 2 here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were going to kind of mention where some of this started, because this actually started back in 2023.
Yeah, at the San Francisco Fan Expo at that time. So they revealed that about 10% of his lines that were recorded were used in the game. So there's 90% of the content that we just did not see as fans and people that played the game.
And so even if he's exaggerating, let's just say he was exaggerating at the time because it was a recent project, he spent hours in the booth. Let's say it was 50-50, just like spitballing it, just assuming, right? That would still be a ton. So even if it's not 90%, you think about how much Tony Todd contributed to this game. Look, let's set aside for just a second the way people feel about Venom.
And Venom in this game specifically.
Yeah, Venom in this game specifically. Because I think that super fans of the Venom character, there's a lot of things that rub them the wrong way. It's not Eddie Brock. It was a total different characterization of Venom. We're going to talk about some of that, but I do think that no matter where you stand on that, I have never seen anyone say Tony Todd did not do a good job.
Yeah.
He was a great Venom. If you look at how he talks about Venom, he understands the character, and I think a lot of that comes from he was such a good actor. He was famous for a lot of things. Candyman, obviously, as well, and I found this out today. He actually voiced Darkseid in Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. I never knew.
It was a great Darkseid, by the way.
Yeah.
Really good Darkseid.
Menacing, terrifying.
Yes.
So Tony Todd is amazing, and the reason I want to put that out there is because some things that are going to come up today are cut content. Some things that are going to come up are our feelings about what this game turned out to be. When we talk about these things, they are not about Tony Todd.
Right.
No negatives are about him. I don't think either of us had any issue with his performance, and I wouldn't be saying... I'd still say that if he was alive today.
Right.
I just think he's a great actor. I think he did a great job. And so any Venom problems, they're around writing. And he didn't do that.
Yeah. And you could look at that even with a lot of cases. You could even do that with Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker and a lot of stuff.
Kevin Conroy and Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League.
Yeah.
These guys, I mean, it sucks. The thing is, these guys who understand the characters because they have to embody them, sometimes more than writers who work on them, often don't get a say in how that character is portrayed. It sucks, but that's how
it's out of their control at that point, and then it's just they kind of deal with the blowback a little bit of that too.
So I do have a question today for you though around all of this, which is do you think I know we can't know, but I'm genuinely wondering, do you think that any of this content will appear in the future? Because Insomniac has shown that they don't have DLC plans. They've said that right now for Spider-Man 2. There is some stuff we're going to talk about with the Venom game that is potentially still happening. We'll see. But do you think that this would happen? Would you want to see any of it? What do you want? Because we'll get into it later, but for me, that's probably the biggest frustration, is not getting to see a lot of this guy's final work.
Yes.
That's just a bummer.
And I think that's what's hard, is that we, especially I think with the expectations of the first game, I think that's where I think a lot of this frustration stems from, is there is the game itself, which was awesome. I think everyone was just blown away by the way that you traverse around the city. I know I spent the first 2 hours of loading that first game in, just swinging around the city and doing nothing.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what a lot of people did. So then, anyways, that game, I think, blows a lot of people out of the water. They love it. Miles Morales, maybe some mixed feelings around there, but I really enjoyed that game.
Me too.
So I think there's a lot of expectations going into this game, and I just think that, and that includes the shelf life of one, where they were adding new suits. There was the DLC, which had extensive amounts of content in it that added quite a bit to the story. So I think going into this, you're expecting DLC, especially with Venom and then the potential of Carnage and all these different things that were teased. So I think that's where a lot of frustration comes in, is that there's a lot of things that are teased that just aren't then coming to fruition. Arkham had some of these problems too, with a few of those things.
Did,
so,
especially at night. You
Yes.
know, when they kind of hit the end and they were running out of time. I think that happened a lot with Insomniac, because the thing is, when we're looking at cut content, it is possible that some of this will be saved for that Venom spin-off game, which did have its existence leaked when Insomniac was hacked. But the thing is, Insomniac narrative director John Paquette told Insider, and I can't speak names, so I just try and mess around with them. Sorry, John. Told Insider that fans would play a significant role in helping the studio decide where to take the series. This is a good thing and a bad thing with Spider-Man fans. There's a lot of really annoying Spider-Man fans. That said, saying we're focused on Spider-Man 2, and what we're going to do is we're going to wait to see how the fans react. We're going to listen to the fans, and we're going to ask ourselves, okay, what do the fans really want? We'll talk about that stuff after we've all had time to sleep and take vacations. I want this to be one of the best Venom stories you've ever experienced. We'll see what reviewers have to say. This is where it kind of becomes a little iffy as we get into more of that stuff, because I don't think it's one of the best Venom games ever experienced. And when Tony Todd did reveal that they only used, he said, about 10% of his lines, which is already a real bummer, you then have at that same event Tony Todd also telling us that there was a lot of ideas that got scrapped, including for Miles to bond with the symbiote for a time. He said he even recorded lines around the character regarding this idea, but it was cut and we never got to see that at all. We don't, as of right now, we don't even have audio snippets of any of this stuff. Like, I'm going to show you some things that we do have, but we don't, like, a lot of these files are gone. There was a lot of takedowns, DMCAs, all things like that, you know, and to be fair, a lot of files, like all of the files that leaked, they were obtained illegally, essentially.
Sure.
Originally. The only reason I feel comfortable showing some of them now is it's been months, you know? But we don't have anything to show for, like, these cut lines, and now, if they don't release them, we're never going to see those.
No, well, that's not the only thing either. So there was also, with those, there's a mission called Meteor that was supposed to be in Act 2. Peter was going to go by train to an unknown force location, find a secret Oscorp base, and then it was presumed that it would be housing the same meteor that Venom, you know, later grabs for an underground Oscorp lab in New York City. So I just, like, there's a lot of things that you'll see in there that we'll probably never see. And I think that's because one thing that we've talked about in the past, and I don't even know if it was on the channel here, but this game just got so out of hand with its budget that they started to get, like, and I think a little bit reasonably so, to an extent. I also understand from their perspective, like, hey, we're trying to make a good game here. It costs a lot of money. But also, $300 million spent and not having a game out. Like, I get also, hey, we need to get this game out there. So I don't know. It's kind of a tough thing.
While Sony was spending like $200 million on Concord at the same time. So Sony was just bleeding their money out in a couple of projects. This is why AAA gaming has become unsustainable too.
Yeah.
Too big. And then there were also reports I didn't even put in our doc here we're looking at that essentially a lot of the Insomniac staff was on Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart while working on this. So then that slowed down development too. Leading to cut stuff. And when we show some of the footage of that test mission, essentially, it's incomplete. Like, it's not a complete mission, but that's from YouTube channel Cryosphere. It's interesting to see that just didn't even happen. You know, and also the scripts are gone, so you can't actually play the mission traditionally. It's just, we kind of get a very small glimpse of what it is, or what it would have been, I guess is a better way to say it.
Yeah, and I think what's frustrating is that this really, it seems like they had more to give, and they wanted to give more to this. Mm-hmm. They were spread out, working on different games, but also just ran out of time and ran out of money at that point. And so the game that came out, and we were talking a little bit about this before too, I think it's still like a good game. Like, I enjoyed this game. There's
yeah, some people think I hate it for some reason. It's just that I see a lot of missed potential.
That's really the thing.
I still think it's a fun video game.
Yeah.
Because at its forefront, it is a video game.
And they added some great stuff in there. The flying around the city, I think, is really fun. And
some of Miles' powers are great. The spider arms, I thought, were fun. You know, there's a lot of, like, little fun mechanics. Some of the side missions I really enjoy. Like, I think some of the side missions are better than the first, like the Sandman mission.
Yeah.
I found more interesting than a lot of the stuff going on in the side missions in the first game.
Some of the boss fights were great. There's some really good stuff going on there.
Martin Lee was such a fun boss fight.
Yeah. So there's some really good stuff going on here. I just think that there's more that they had planned. And that's where I think DLC makes a lot of sense for this. And I think that's why when Tony Todd had said 90% of my lines weren't used, I don't even know if that's necessarily because the studio didn't want to use them. I think it's just like we don't have the time to be able to make all this happen.
A lot of assumptions are that maybe people were at Sony were hoping that they would win that Game of the Year award and that they could then ride on the coattails of that to push out more content. But after you had the hack and then they didn't win a Game of the Year award, then they just went radio silence on this DLC. And I've made a couple videos talking about that, so I feel like if you want to see my thoughts on that, I don't want to beat that into the ground. But there was even more looking at this because when going through the PC build of the game, it was actually discovered as well, and I believe this was by this Reddit user, which is, I'm going to say your name wrong, Beladeiro Supremo, but then it was actually removed off of Reddit and then backed up and reported by a Venom enthusiast on Twitter whose name, I believe her name is Salman11835779, lots of numbers in the name, goes by Worm on Reddit, or sorry, on Twitter, actually had pointed out that there were a lot of different symbiotes planned for this game too, which I wonder how that would have played into Tony Todd.
Yeah.
Because there were quite a few. These were essentially Riot, Phage, Agony, and Lasher. So we don't really know if Tony Todd recorded lines around these characters or not. The Riot interaction was actually shown near symbiote Spider-Man, so we don't know essentially when that was, but they also did show there was a possibility then of Venom appearing in Act 2 of the game even earlier, as a line of code revealed a possible mission or set of missions based off of the story Venom Separation Anxiety. So T, can you kind of talk a little bit about what Separation Anxiety was and kind of what that could have been?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that was a comic storyline, actually a game a little bit later too, where Eddie Brock's symbiote, he had spawned 5 other symbiotes, which were created by the Life Foundation. So those symbiotes were Riot and the rest, and since Eddie isn't the host in the game, we don't know how this would have played into the game specifically, and it would likely take a disenfranchised Insomniac employee years from now to reveal that information.
Yeah, they're probably not going to tell us that right now.
No, but it definitely happens though, so I think
I hope it does happen.
Yeah.
I hope in 10 years that there are a couple of people who worked on this, guys, girls, whatever, who want to say like, hey, this is some of the thoughts we had originally. But right now, we don't get that.
Yeah.
And to be honest, here's the thing. I know every time I bring this up, people get mad for some reason, but like, I don't really blame some of the people, like the worker level people, for not wanting to be transparent. First off, it's your job. You don't want to lose that.
Right.
Secondly, a lot of them are dealing with identity theft issues now where like they had their credit card, social security, addresses, all this stuff leaked to the internet. Probably their last concern right now is Spider-Man 2.
Right.
It's probably their actual real life. And the bosses above them and the bosses at Sony who dictated, hey, get this game out the door so a lot of stuff didn't happen, they're the ones who would like be able to talk about this stuff, and they're not gonna, because that would make them look bad.
Yep.
Why would you say, hey, by the way, we led to part of the problem that this game had. Here's what it could have been. Now you're just gonna make people mad.
Yeah. And yeah, if there's no reason, honestly, a lot of this stuff I think they feel is, and for the most part it usually does, just kind of blows over, and like we'll move on to the next thing, and we'll get people excited about something
then
else.
Then you have jackasses like us bringing it up like a year later,
going
through all the
ruining the bit, you know,
all the cut stuff. I mean, but here's the thing, T. Like, you know, you have those characters, right? And there was actually a boss battle that was in the works revealed, I believe, for Riot. So you know, we have some stuff of that, and I think again, it's okay to show some of this. I mean, people have showed entire leaked trailers of like the Great Web and stuff at this point, and we're like, I don't know, a year out from the hack or more, I believe. So it's like, this isn't hurting anyone at this point. But I do want to maintain the reason I didn't go through all this at first was I felt kind of scummy about it.
Sure.
When it was happening.
Yeah.
It just felt scummy because I saw a lot of developers saying like, my life is ruined. It's like, whoa, time to capitalize off your life being ruined.
Right.
Sorry, bitch. Like, I didn't really want to do that, you know? So that's why we're looking at it now. But when we're looking at that, you know, like that possible Act 2 appearance of Venom, How do you think that would have even worked? Like, just you and me spitballing, because I already thought Peter's symbiote arc, Peter with the symbiote, you're trying to do an addiction storyline, you know, you're trying to base it a little bit more off that 90s animated series Spider-Man, that almost Raimi Spider-Man 3 type thing. You know, originally the symbiote was not an addiction allegory in the original comics.
Yeah.
It was something that kind of came up in later adaptations of it. So you're trying to go with that, right? It's already rushed because you already just have Peter mildly being a dick for a few days and then he gets rid of the symbiote. I mean, it's pretty snappy. Like, I would have preferred this whole game focused on the symbiote arc and maybe did some really hard to repair damage to Peter's life and the people around him. You know, that addiction actually hurting him and the people around him, kind of like Iron Man Demon in a Bottle, but with the symbiote, where, you know, you had Iron Man with his alcohol addiction kind of ruining his life. I thought that could have been a really cool, you know, if you want to do that drug metaphor and stuff, could have been a really cool, darker story to do, but they dropped that fairly quickly, as then the symbiote doesn't even go to Eddie, by the way. It goes to Harry in a different kind of incarnation of who this Venom is. And so now you have one act to try and tell that Harry Venom storyline, and you had a couple of acts barely to get into the Peter symbiote storyline, because he doesn't even start with the symbiote at the beginning of the game. It takes a little bit to get it.
Right.
Then you really only have it for a few hours. So, like, you've already rushed Peter's drug addiction symbiote storyline so much, is kind of what I'm saying. Like, how would you do this? Like, how would you get Venom in there earlier?
Well, that's what I wondered too, like what the plan was, because they really did, I think, and this is kind of going to what we were talking about at the beginning of how we have some qualms with this story. I really think that this story is still, when you're playing the game from beginning to end, and obviously mixing in some side missions, things like that, you're still looking at a 25-hour story.
If you're really taking your time, I saw some people say they platinumed this game in like 22 hours.
That sounds
like
about
just
right.
kind of smashing through different things. Like, it was pretty quick. Like, platinuming it, not just beating the main story. Well, and something I said even before this came out was just, I don't care if your game is quick, but it has to be high quality and hit all the story beats. Then my problem with the game now is that I don't feel like it fully fleshed out all those story beats. I've seen short stories that hit every story beat.
Yes.
But if you need to have too many characters that you can't get through all of them and flesh them all out in that time, that's when you need a longer game. And that's kind of where I think Spider-Man 2 ends up falling, is you either needed to cut some people and some arcs, or you needed to have a longer game.
Like, having Kraven being kind of the big one, and then you've got Venom on the side, I just think there's too much going on there. Like, I think there's... You can do things like that, but you really need to have a longer, bigger game then if you're going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think to tell the concise story, because with the first one, there's side stuff going on for sure, but the main plot remains on Ock throughout the entire thing.
Ock and Lee.
Yes.
And it's very focused on them.
And it tells a well-rounded story that makes sense, and you feel like there's resolution at the end of it. Like, I feel like, okay, that's good. I feel like I got what I needed to out of that, and it all makes sense. And I can see this from beginning to end, where he's a student with Ock, and then when you see where it then develops and what it ends up being. This is like, it just felt like the Venom story, there's so much more going on there, and you don't get to Venom, really, until the latter, like the midpoint of the game is where you're really starting to dive into that more and more, I think. And so I just think you've got to really start with Venom strong, and if you're going to do a 2-villain arc throughout for your entire game, you should probably start that right at the beginning, and have that somehow blending and meet all at one point. And they got to a cool point. I thought the interaction with Kraven and Venom and everything that was going on there was cool.
I would have saved that for the very end, though. If I was writing this game and everything was the same as it was, I would have wanted Act 1 and 2 to be much more fleshed out. You get rid of that symbiote invasion, even though it was very cool. I would have focused a whole game on the symbiote invasion type thing.
Agreed.
If you really want, you know, Venom to be this heal the world, we'll take over the world type thing, which usually he's not. You know, usually he's more focused on Spider-Man. But if you really wanted him to do that, I would have personally ended the game with Venom killing Kraven.
Yeah.
Leading into the next game. Like, maybe the very final mission of the game is a Venom rampage. And then he kills Kraven at the end, credits. You know, and then the third game is focusing on that addiction hurt Peter's life, right? And all this stuff. And then Harry is so angry at him. Maybe we saw Harry's health decline slower. I've seen people on Twitter be such freaking pricks about this too. Because, like, Jill said something about this too on Twitter. Like, hey, why didn't we just see Harry's health decline a little slower? If we were supposed to really feel for him and, you know, see how Peter was affecting him, and you kind of you see that in like 2 cutscenes.
Yeah.
You see him get mad at Peter like twice, and it's like really in your face storytelling. Like, now he's mad at him, so he shattered the window. Like, their friendship is shattered. It's like it's like high school level writing at that point.
It is
not to be a dick,
a little bit,
but you know, it's like you needed more time for that. You needed more time to build to that. Not just we get Agent Venom Harry for 1 or 2 missions, then that's done. Then we get Harry with his cane and his declining health, and he calls you a couple of times. And you see him like twice, and then cut to Harry becoming Venom.
Right.
Too fast.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like if you were going to introduce Venom in Act 2, you would need Act 1 and 2 to each be like 6 hours longer. And then you need a longer Act 3. Or you need to save all this for the 3rd game. So it's like, on one hand, I'm like, the game has problems, but on the other hand, I feel like trying to ramrod a separation anxiety storyline into the middle, unless this game was significantly longer, like at least 10 hours, would have made it worse.
I agree, and I keep going back, and all I can think about is that my gut is to give Insomniac the better benefit of the doubt here, and think that they wanted to do that, but they just ran up against constraints.
Money and time.
That's kind of what I feel like happened. Like, I feel like the intentions were there. They made great games before, and this was, once again, not a bad game. It just doesn't feel like it hit the standard that they normally are hitting.
But like you said, then isn't it also their responsibility to manage that money and time?
Which
you know,
is
it's
very
like
fair.
How did you hit that point? Like where it was that hard for you to, like, you did it twice before. What made this one so hard for you to do?
Well, and also, it's not like they didn't have much money. $300 million is a lot of money.
They had lifetime's worth of money, a population's GDP, and they couldn't finish the game.
A lot more than a lot of other games get, you know? So
Yeah.
that's
I mean, there's movies with much lower budgets.
Yes! So
Joker had a $90 million budget, right?
Right.
The
I think
Joker?
less, actually. I think it was even less than that. So I think it was like 50. So I just think that there's a lot of, like, I don't know, like, give and take here, where they had a lot of money. Maybe they didn't manage it well, but maybe they just needed a little bit more time and maybe a little bit more to get to where they wanted to get to.
And not to be working on Ratchet and Clank at the same time, maybe.
Right. So maybe the time management wasn't there. Like, it just feels like there was something that slipped through the cracks where, like, they were, here's $300 million, here's the development team that did this before, this should go well. What happened in this time frame? And something fell off. There was just a small little gap, and now everyone noticed that quickly because they're big fans of this franchise and everything that they've done before.
No, I completely agree. And I know, like, when we talk about stuff for this long, a lot of people think it's just yapping or whatever. But I feel like you can't talk about stuff this complicated. You know, you have a criminal activity hack, you have a rushed game at the end, you have a inflated budget, you have corporate oversight, you know, you have a man who sadly died, and now you're not going to see his work, which we'll get into at the very end here too a little bit more. But all of that stuff, it's like we could ramrod through these in 5 minutes, but it doesn't really do it justice. You know, like, this is someone's work who is now no longer with us.
Right.
And I guess that's to me where it's frustrating, because like you did have other stuff here too. Like, you did have an Extreme Carnage DLC content, which was mentioned in the Spider-Man 2 content strategy image. I don't know what to think of that image. I've seen people say it was fake. I've seen people say it was real. I've seen variations of that image. You know, it did actually mention the Beetle infestation as well on that, which came up in the debug menu on the main menu. I don't know if you remember this, but when Insomniac updated the game, they accidentally made it so you could access the debug menu and see certain things that they had been working on. One of which was a mission list around Beetle, the Spider-Man villain.
Know that. No.
So that one doesn't really tie into what we were talking about today, because other than that's existence, we know nothing about that at all. No one ever said anything about it. But that showed up in the debug menu in-game. You could see it on your PS5.
Wow.
And that also showed up on the content strategy image, which to me, because that image, kind of came out around the time of that hack, makes that image to me seem more real.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, when I'm looking at this, you know, you have that Carnage stuff, and some of this I could see saving for another game. Like, you don't need Venom to have Carnage. You could have a Carnage storyline in Spider-Man 3 if you want, and you could do that well. Could also turn out like Hush in Arkham Knight if you don't, take your time, which is my big concern because there's so many storylines left over. But you could do that. I guess my question, though, looking at this, is not like what's going to happen to Carnage, because you can move him. You know, you can do that. The voice actor didn't pass away, nothing like that. My question looking at all of this is not what will happen to him, not what will happen to Miles, not what will happen to any of this stuff. What will happen to Venom? I mean, like, there is genuinely, like, and when I say this, I really mean it. It is a tragedy when anyone dies, you know, like when a good person, a kind person dies, especially someone who's very talented, you know, they're affecting so many lives around them in roles like this, that's a tragedy. It's a bigger tragedy than just the role going away. So that's always worth mentioning. You lose a Kevin Conroy, it's not just that you lose Batman, you lose a good person. You know, so when you have someone like Tony Todd pass away, that really sucks. I guess to me, though, when I'm looking at this is, and I want to be careful not to blame Insomniac for this, because I feel like this could really be spitting in someone's face. Like, I'm not saying they killed him, so just keep that in mind. But he's gone. So what do? I mean, do you use AI? Most people are not going to be okay with that. Was his family okay with that? Was he? I don't know. Do you recast Venom? I mean, because you're not going to get rid of Venom. I mean, if you did, that would be pathetic storytelling. If Venom is just gone, terrible. If there's nothing else for that character, that would be awful. So, do you recast him? A lot of people are not going to accept that recast. They're going to be like, hey, we remember that you didn't use 90% of Tony Todd's lines, and he said that before he died. What the hell were you doing? They're going to hold that against you. You know, and like to me, when I'm looking at that, at best, that's a gross oversight. To hire someone so talented, have them record so much, and then be like, we're not going to use that, and then they die? Like, yes, you can't plan for that, but you have to think, you know, when you're working with talented actors and stuff, like, if you snub someone in a way, or you waste their work, there's not usually a way to repurpose that work. That work is just scrapped. You know, like, unless you're going to make a director's cut, which I don't think they're going to do because it would cost millions of dollars to add on all that cut content, we're never going to see that. So we don't have Tony Todd anymore. You know, he's not alive. We can't get amazing works that he did. And this has compromised the Venom character in general, even if you were totally fine with everything they did with the character. It's like, well, what's going to happen now? When I'm looking at this to me is like a pretty big blemish on Insomniac, where I'm wondering, whose choice was that? You know, whose choice was it to have him do so much work and then to use so little of it? And we don't even know what most of it was, other than tying into the Miles symbiote, maybe tying into the Act 2 separation anxiety. Maybe those acts got restructured a little bit, like maybe Act 1, 2, and 3 are not what they would have, like maybe the lines shifted, you know, as to like what was Act 1, what was Act 2. We don't know, because if the game was supposed to be longer, maybe that's the case. But at the end of the day, this man is gone. And I guess, I don't know, not to ramble, I kind of want to know your thoughts on that, because to me it's just really sad. It really reminds me of Kevin Conroy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, and I don't even know if I think it's something that we'll find out, like you mentioned before, years later, as far as what happened and why certain things were done the way that they were.
And if those lines are even recorded still. Like,
right.
That's, I just want to throw in there, that's something that really bums me out, is sometimes work is discarded.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, we didn't use this, we deleted it. So now it's like, well, if that happened, that's awful. Because now he's gone.
Right.
And now there's no getting that back. There's no even releasing it online like, hey, this is some of his final work.
Or even like adding it in if you wanted to do something with him and you could make something work with the lines that you had. Like, there's no potential there. So that would be really sad. I do think that we'll find out years later as far as what happened. As far as like looking at the character, it's really... this has happened in things before where it's always a tricky thing to navigate. You think of like Heath Ledger, you think of Paul Walker, you think of a lot of these guys where this has happened.
Kevin Conroy, Chadwick Boseman.
Yes.
It happens a lot, yeah.
And it's a tough spot to do, and to then move forward with that character, with or without that character, tastefully, and to do it in a way that's honoring their memory. It's a tough thing to do. So I think, really, in this case, in my opinion, the thing that makes the most sense, if you can't use any of his lines, is I think probably recasting. If you want to, like, as far as storytelling goes, makes the most sense. I think that's something where it's sad, and obviously people will know that happens, but that's something that's it does happen in a lot of these franchises, where if you're gonna have a project that goes, or a story that goes for 5, 10, 15 years, like some of these long ones do, then sometimes people pass away in that time. And so then it's a matter of obviously honoring their memory and not doing something that I guess is disrespectful in any way.
Yeah, you don't want to be shitty.
No, you don't want to be shitty. And that's kind of the concern. And so I think that I think in this case, recasting in a very I guess tasteful way is probably what I see happening. But I mean, if they just drop Venom as a character, like you said, that'd
be a horrible character.
That's a crime. That's a crime.
Because like
that is. Yeah.
I understand, like, even if you don't want Harry to be Venom anymore, the Venom symbiote, which is the easiest thing to call it. I mean, the symbiote itself is still out there.
Yeah.
It kind of slinks away,
right.
you know. And then of course as well, there's the sample of it that Cletus Cassidy gets, you know, with the Flame Cult in order to become Carnage later on.
Right.
We even see like his pictures that he drew of like the prophecy of becoming Carnage. Remember that in the book?
Yes.
It's sick. So like there's stuff you can do with the symbiotes, but I think in general this game, it missed the boat in a lot of ways with covering the addiction Peter arc enough.
Yeah.
And then when it gets down to it, it feels very much like getting to Venom was rushed. They didn't have enough time to flesh out Venom. I kind of wish they had just picked.
I agree.
Like I feel like doing both there was not enough time here.
Yeah.
And I guess in closing, I want to be clear on one thing. I'm not trying to say that like Insomniac is in the wrong for Tony Todd passing away. I think that would be very disingenuous and honestly a pretty hateful statement for no reason. What I'm trying to say is this. I and many other people going forward, when you do anything else with Venom, if it's this incarnation, I'm not saying drop him, but I'm saying this is the truth. We'll be looking at this and saying, what could this have been? What could Tony Todd have done with this character if you wrote him better, if you gave him the rest of his lines in this game, or what could Tony Todd have done with the next game that Venom is in? You know, that one's not really their fault, but it will come up because of the fact that they cut so much from his performance. It kind of comes off to me like maybe that was not something he was supposed to reveal. I don't know. You know, I think he was just being candid.
Yeah.
I think that's why a lot of actors are not candid, because now we know that a lot of his stuff didn't get used, and now that reflects poorly on Insomniac and the writers at Insomniac around this game. Just reflects poorly on them. We may never learn more about it. We don't know. It's just in a very uncertain place, and I, as somebody who believes in film preservation, music preservation, game preservation, all these things, where I believe that art should be around for future generations, even art I disagree with, you know, or don't like. I think it should be accessible to future generations. When I'm seeing art that is scrapped and not even accessible to the generation it was created in, that is a real bummer for me that just really makes me kind of livid.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think that, and maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, and this is not the right way to look at it, but I can't, I guess, shake the idea that I feel like Insomniac's heart was in the right place. It just ended up being a misguided effort that was maybe too ambitious. They got overwhelmed, they felt the corporate pressure, and then now here we are. And now they've been hacked, they've got all this insane stuff. Like, this just really, all that could have gone wrong in a lot of ways went wrong for them. And so I think, and then Tony Todd passing, obviously they don't see that coming. So like there's a lot of things that I just think came at them all at once. And once again, this is not to say that they're not at fault.
No, you're not excusing anyone. You're just saying that from your lens, it's something where it's like, you don't feel like it was malicious.
I don't think so.
And I agree, I don't think it was malicious. I'm just saying that I think me and a lot of other people, especially who are fans of these arcs in the comics or who are fans of these characters, and I know you are too, but I think a lot of us are going to look at it as like, we know what you did.
Yeah.
Like, we know we don't know exactly what you cut, but we know that you didn't use this talented person's work.
Right.
And that sucks.
And that does suck.
And I think that stigma will kind of stay.
And I think that's fair. Yeah.
It's just a shame. I don't know. Do you have anything else in closing? Because I kind of want to wrap it up, but I just think overall it's a tragedy. It's like there's stuff I think could be moved. You know, the Life Foundation symbiotes, is there a reason you need them in this game? No. That can be moved. Carnage, well, we got an intro to him. That seems like something that could come back if you want to dedicate time to it and do it well. The Meteor mission, we introduced the Meteor a different way. We didn't need that. That's okay. You know, I'm okay with some stuff, and I can accept some things. But like things like that to me is the core, like the Tony Todd stuff is the core of like, this blows.
Yeah.
You know, like this is like the worst outcome that could have happened after choosing that in the narrative.
Yeah.
Like his passing.
Well, like we've talked about before, we've referenced back to this a lot, is like if there was Kevin Conroy and we were looking at, unfortunately, something like Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League, where there is a lot of content that's coming out after he passed, and a lot of voice lines and things that you'll hear there. Like, if there was something going on with that with Tony Todd, or if there was an opportunity there, I think the fans would love to hear that. And I think that's the point, is that there's content there loved his version of Venom. He's incredible at this role, and so wanting to hear more of that, it's like when someone's good at something and it becomes iconic and it becomes something that people go back for more for. If you deprive them of all of that work that's there and just sitting there, it's incredibly fresh. And it'd be like, and I keep going back to the DCAU, but even Mark Hamill, if he had a bunch of lines as the Joker and that was just sitting away and we didn't get to hear
died.
that, yeah, and then we just never got to hear that. It's like that's someone that I really like. I cling on to that character. Like I know that character. I've watched everything that he's been in. Like I'm a huge fan. So like
that's why we respect what Fast and Furious did so much.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, they could have scrapped Brian when Paul Walker died. They could have just rewritten the whole story. It would cost a lot of money. They could have done it and just recasted Brian or done anything like that. But they found a way to preserve the work he did.
Yep.
I think that's important, and I think that maybe this would have gone differently if he had passed during the creation of the game. Maybe there would have been more of an actual concerted effort to get more of that in the game. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just know that it's not, and I think that that's kind of where the bummer comes from for me.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
So anyway, let us know what you think in the comments down below. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, it's kind of a more sad one, so when we do a sad video, I try not to like shill my stuff a lot and like plug my stuff. So like I'm just gonna say, if you want to support this channel, there's a lot of ways to do so in the description. I feel like it's just kind of tacky to be like, go to my store, buy my stuff. Like at the end of the day, a man died. Like this is serious to me. It sucks. It really sucks. And no matter what you think about this version of the character, I do ask you, you know, if you stuck it out to this point, you probably would be, but I just ask you to try and be respectful of him. You know, because like this was a human being who by all accounts was a good man, who did good work, and who was beholden to the writers for what they made this character to be. And he took that and he gave it life. And when he was on the screen, even if you didn't like some of the character beats, the ways he got there, stuff like that, like the interaction with, you know, Craven, the interaction where he comes down on the web line behind Peter, like Todd gave those things life through his voice lines. It wouldn't have been the same if I was like, hey, I'm Venom. You know, it's like that voice actor does give that life. So I really respect that art. And that's why it bums me out so much. So let us know what you think. Hope you have a great day. And as always, everyone, stay shway.